You know what fascinates me? Lions born in captivity. These magnificent creatures with all their raw power, their natural instincts, their genetic coding for dominance, living their entire lives in an enclosure, being fed by handlers, never knowing what they're truly capable of. Scientists have discovered something remarkable. When these lions are released into the wild, most of them die. Not because they lack the physical capabilities of wild lions. They have the same muscles, the same teeth, the same claws. They die because they never developed the mindset of a hunter. Let that sink in for a moment. The difference between a lion that rules the savannah and one that can't survive in it isn't physical, it's mental. I see this same phenomenon in human potential every single day. People with extraordinary capabilities living ordinary lives. People with champion DNA accepting mediocre results, not because they lack ability, but because they're operating with a captive mindset in a world that demands warriors. Let me show you something. Picks up an ordinary plastic water bottle and squeezes it. Notice what happens when I apply pressure. The water pushes back with exactly the same force I'm applying. This is a law of physics. But here's what's fascinating. When I release the pressure, the water immediately stops pushing. It has no memory, no growth, no learning. Your mind works exactly the opposite way. Every pressure you face, every challenge you encounter, every obstacle you overcome, your mind remembers. It grows, it adapts. This is why two people can face the same challenge and emerge completely different. One develops the mindset of a champion, the other remains trapped in patterns of mediocrity. I worked with an Olympic athlete who shared something profound with me. She said, the medal wasn't won at the Olympics. It was won at 5 a.m. when nobody was watching, when my body was screaming to stop, when every excuse to quit seemed reasonable. The Olympics was just where I collected the result of the mindset I had built. This is what separates champions from competitors. Champions understand that their greatest competition isn't in the arena, it's in the mirror. It's in those quiet moments when no one is watching, when the choice between comfort and growth presents itself, when the easy path beckons. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how champions think. Not the motivational poster version, the real, raw, scientific blueprint of championship thinking. I'm going to show you why most people, like those captive lions, never discover their true capabilities. And most importantly, I'm going to show you how to unlock the champion mindset that's been dormant within you. Some of you came here today hoping for inspiration. But I'm not here to inspire you, I'm here to awaken you. Because once you understand how champions really think, once you grasp the laws that govern peak performance, you'll never see yourself the same way again. Are you ready to think like a champion? Because what I'm about to share will either make you extremely uncomfortable or absolutely unstoppable. The choice is yours. Let's begin. Let me share something fascinating discovered in the field of genetics. Scientists recently found that every human being carries what they call dormant genes. Genetic capabilities that exist within our DNA but remain inactive. Under specific conditions, these dormant genes can suddenly activate, releasing capabilities that were always present but never expressed. I witnessed this principle in action while working with a group of Navy SEALs during their infamous Hell Week training. Out of a class of 140 candidates, only 18 completed the training. The fascinating part, physical testing showed no significant difference in strength, endurance, or capability between those who finished and those who quit. The difference was entirely mental. Here's what most people don't understand about championship performance. Your current abilities are not a measure of your capabilities. They're simply a measure of what your current mindset has accessed. Think about this. Studies show we typically access only about 40% of our actual physical capabilities. Under extreme circumstances, people have lifted cars, outrun animals, survived impossible conditions. Why? Because crisis bypassed their mental limitations and accessed their true capabilities. But champions don't wait for crisis to access their full potential. They understand something profound about human excellence. Peak performance isn't about acquiring new capabilities, it's about accessing what's already within you. Just like those dormant genes, championship qualities lie within every person. The difference is in the activation. Let me demonstrate this with an experiment I conduct in elite performance workshops. I ask participants to hold a plank position, a simple exercise where you support your body weight on your forearms and toes. First, I tell them to hold it as long as they can. Most people last between 1-2 minutes. Then, after a rest, I tell them I'll give them $10,000 if they can double their time. Suddenly, almost everyone does. What changed? Their muscles didn't get stronger in those few minutes. Their endurance didn't increase. What changed was their mindset. The limit wasn't physical, it was mental. This reveals something crucial about the champion's DNA. It's not about being gifted, it's about being awakened. Every champion you admire developed their mindset through specific patterns of thinking and behavior. They weren't born with something you lack, they've simply activated something you haven't yet accessed. Consider this. When researchers studied the brains of Olympic athletes, they discovered something remarkable. During competition, their brains showed less activity, not more. They had trained their minds to eliminate mental interference, to access their capabilities with less internal resistance. This is what I call championship circuitry, neural pathways optimized for peak performance. But here's the most crucial understanding about the champion's DNA. It develops through intentional stress. Just like a muscle grows stronger under the right amount of resistance, your championship mindset develops through deliberately chosen challenges. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, every time you push past your perceived limits, every time you face your fears, you're not just performing actions, you're altering your mental DNA. I worked with a business leader who transformed his company from near bankruptcy to industry leadership in 18 months. When I asked him what changed, he said something profound. I stopped trying to become successful and started thinking like I already was successful. I realized the capability was already in me. I just had to access it. This is the fundamental truth about championship thinking. The capacity for excellence isn't something you need to create. It's something you need to access. The DNA of a champion isn't a special gift given to a chosen few. It's a dormant potential waiting to be activated in every person. But here's the warning. This activation isn't comfortable. Just like those Navy SEAL candidates, you'll face moments that test every fiber of your being. You'll encounter internal resistance that makes you want to quit. This is normal. This is necessary. Because these moments of resistance aren't testing your limits. They're expanding them. Are you ready to understand exactly how this activation works? Because in our next section, we'll explore the specific laws that govern peak performance, the mental principles that transform ordinary thinkers into extraordinary achievers. Have you ever observed what happens when metal is forged? The blacksmith doesn't just heat the metal. They alternate between intense heat and precise hammering. Too much heat alone would melt the metal. Too much hammering alone would shatter it. It's the rhythmic dance between pressure and release that creates something unbreakable. This reveals the first law of mental excellence, the law of deliberate pressure. Your mind, like that metal, transforms through strategic stress. I learned this principle firsthand while training with elite military units. They don't just make training hard, they make it strategically challenging. Each pressure point is designed to strengthen a specific mental capability. Let me share a profound example. I worked with an entrepreneur who kept hitting the same revenue ceiling year after year. His problem wasn't strategy, it was mental threshold. Think about a thermometer in a room. It can never show a temperature higher than its designed capacity. Similarly, your results can never exceed your mental thermostat setting. What happened next completely transformed my understanding of peak performance. Instead of focusing on business strategies, we focused on systematically raising his mental thermostat through what I call threshold challenges. Every week he had to do something that made him uncomfortable. Public speaking, difficult conversations, bold business moves. Within 6 months, his revenue had tripled. This leads us to the second law, the law of intentional discomfort. Champions understand something that average performers don't. Comfort is the enemy of excellence. But here's the crucial distinction. They don't seek random discomfort. They choose specific challenges that target their growth areas. Think about this. When you work out in a gym, you don't just randomly lift things. You follow a specific program that progressively challenges your muscles. Your mind needs the same approach. Random stress creates anxiety. Strategic stress creates strength. I call this the edge practice. Every day, champions deliberately operate at the edge of their capabilities. They don't wait for challenges to find them. They actively seek situations that stretch their mental limits. It's like a muscle that grows only when pushed to failure. Your championship mindset develops only when regularly pushed to its current limits. The third law is what I call the law of pressure response. Most people try to avoid pressure. Champions do something radically different. They learn to love it. They understand that pressure isn't their enemy. It's their ally in accessing peak performance. Consider this remarkable discovery. Studies of elite athletes show that under intense pressure, their heart rates actually decrease, while average performers' heart rates spike. Why? Because champions have trained themselves to interpret pressure not as a threat, but as a trigger for peak performance. I witnessed this transformation in a surgeon I worked with. Initially, she would get severely anxious before complex procedures. We didn't try to eliminate the pressure. Instead, we transformed her relationship with it. We created what I call a pressure reframe. Instead of seeing pressure as something to survive, she learned to see it as something that made her better. The fourth and most crucial law is the law of mental momentum. Just as a rocket uses most of its fuel to break free from Earth's gravity, the hardest part of mental excellence is breaking free from old thinking patterns. But once you break through, maintaining that new level becomes progressively easier. Here's the vital understanding. These laws work whether you believe in them or not. Just as gravity operates regardless of your opinion about it, these mental laws govern peak performance regardless of your awareness of them. The only question is, will you work with them or against them? Many people hit a ceiling in their performance and spend years pushing against it, wondering why they can't break through. Now you understand why. They're violating these fundamental laws of mental excellence. They're seeking comfort instead of strategic stress. They're avoiding pressure instead of using it. They're waiting for breakthrough instead of creating it. But here's what's exciting. The moment you begin working with these laws instead of against them, everything changes. Your relationship with challenge transforms. Your capacity for pressure expands. Your mental thermostat starts to rise. Are you ready to learn how to practically apply these laws in your daily life? Because in our next section, we'll explore exactly how to build what I call the champion's operating system. The daily practices that turn these laws into lived reality. Remember, champions aren't born, they're forged. And the forge is lit not by circumstance, but by choice. Let me share a fascinating discovery made at NASA. When they prepare astronauts for space, they don't just train their bodies. They literally rewire their brains through a process called neural adaptation. An astronaut's brain must learn to function in an environment where up and down don't exist. What was once impossible becomes natural through systematic rewiring. I call this process mental installation, and it's exactly how champions develop their extraordinary capabilities. They systematically install new mental software that makes peak performance not just possible, but automatic. Let me demonstrate this with a remarkable experiment conducted at Stanford. Researchers divided basketball players into 3 groups. The first group practiced free throws physically. The second group only visualized making free throws. The third did nothing. After 30 days, the physical practice group improved by 24%. But here's what's astonishing. The visualization group improved by 23%. Their brains couldn't tell the difference between physical practice and vivid mental rehearsal. This reveals something profound about the champion's operating system. Your brain responds to mental commands as if they were physical reality. Champions leverage this by installing what I call performance programs, specific mental sequences that trigger peak performance states. I worked with a world-class tennis player who was struggling with consistency. His physical skills were exceptional, but under pressure, his performance would crumble. We discovered his mental operating system was running outdated software, beliefs, thought patterns, and emotional responses that didn't serve peak performance. Here's how we rewired his system. First, we identified his peak performance state, that mental zone where everything flows perfectly. Then, through a process I call state anchoring, we created specific triggers that could activate this state on command. Just like clicking an icon on your computer opens a program, these triggers would open his peak performance programming. But here's the crucial understanding. Installing new mental software isn't enough. You must uninstall the old programs first. Think about what happens when you install new software on a computer still running old, conflicting programs. You get crashes, freezes, inconsistent performance. Your mind works the same way. This is why we use what I call the identity installation protocol. Champions don't just change what they do, they change who they are at the core operating system level. When you try to perform at a higher level while maintaining your old identity, you create internal conflict. It's like trying to run advanced software on an outdated operating system. Let me show you how this works. Close your eyes for a moment. Think of a time when you performed at your absolute best. Notice how you moved, how you thought, how you felt. That wasn't just a peak moment. That was a glimpse of your champion operating system in action. The question isn't whether you have this system, it's whether you know how to access it consistently. The installation process has three key components. First, mental rehearsal, systematically visualizing peak performance with all 5 senses engaged. Second, state conditioning, deliberately practicing your new mental patterns under increasing levels of pressure. Third, identity reinforcement, consistently acting in alignment with your champion identity until it becomes your default operating system. I witnessed this transformation with a business executive who went from constantly doubting himself to radiating unshakable confidence. The difference? He stopped trying to act confident and instead installed the mental operating system of a confident leader. He didn't just change his behavior, he changed his core programming. Here's the powerful truth. Your current results are a perfect reflection of your current operating system. If you want different results, you need to install different mental software. This isn't positive thinking or motivation. This is systematic mental reprogramming. Champions understand this at a deep level. They know that peak performance isn't about trying harder with the same mental software. It's about installing and running a completely different operating system, one that makes excellence automatic. Think about this. Every time you open your phone, you automatically know how to use it. You don't have to think about every tap and swipe. Why? Because you've installed that operating system so deeply that it's become automatic. Your champion mindset can work the same way, but only if you systematically install it. Are you ready to learn exactly how to install this new operating system? Because in our next section, we'll explore the practical steps of strategic excellence. How to turn these mental principles into consistent, measurable results. Remember, your potential isn't limited by your capabilities, it's limited by your operating system. Upgrade the system, and you upgrade everything it produces. Consider what happens when water freezes. At 33 degrees Fahrenheit, nothing extraordinary occurs. At 32 degrees, a complete transformation takes place. 1 degree makes the difference between water and ice. Excellence works the same way. Small strategic shifts can create massive transformations. I learned this principle while studying the training methods of elite military special forces. They discovered something fascinating. It wasn't the intensity of training that created excellence, it was the precision. Each exercise, each drill, each challenge was strategically designed to develop specific capabilities. Let me share a powerful example. I worked with a professional athlete who was consistently placing 4th or 5th in competitions. Physically, she was equal to or better than her competitors, but she was missing what I call strategic triggers, precise actions that activate peak performance states. We developed what I call a victory ritual, a specific sequence of mental and physical actions that automatically triggered her peak performance state. Think about a master archer. Before every shot, they perform the exact same sequence of movements. This isn't superstition, it's programming. It creates neural pathways that bypass conscious thought and activate excellence automatically. Here's how we build strategic excellence. First, identify your performance anchors, specific actions or thoughts that consistently precede your best performances. These become your activation triggers. Just like pressing a button turns on a machine, these triggers turn on your peak performance state. Second, create what I call excellence loops. Small, repeated cycles of action that progressively strengthen your capability. Think about how a pilot trains in a flight simulator. They don't practice entire flights. They practice specific scenarios repeatedly until excellence becomes automatic. The third element is what I call strategic stress testing. Most people try to avoid pressure. Champions systematically expose themselves to increasing levels of pressure in controlled environments. This isn't about being reckless. It's about expanding your capacity systematically. I witnessed this transform a public speaker who struggled with anxiety. Instead of trying to eliminate the nervousness, we created specific triggers that transformed that energy into fuel for performance. Within months, she was commanding audiences of thousands with natural confidence. Here's the crucial understanding. Strategic excellence isn't about working harder. It's about working with precision. A martial artist doesn't just throw thousands of punches. They throw the same punch thousands of times with precise attention to each movement until excellence becomes automatic. Your strategic excellence must include what I call measurement markers, specific indicators that show you're moving toward mastery. Don't just track results. Track the quality of your execution, the consistency of your state management, the effectiveness of your triggers. Remember, excellence isn't a destination, it's a progression. Each small strategic shift, maintained consistently, creates compound growth in your capabilities. Like that freezing point of water, you may be just 1 degree away from a complete transformation in your performance. Are you ready to learn how to test and strengthen these new capabilities? Because in our next section, we'll explore how to battle test your mindset, how to ensure your excellence holds up under real-world pressure. The path to excellence isn't about magnitude, it's about precision. Are you ready to be precise? In the mountains of Japan, there grows a unique tree called the yakusugi cedar. Unlike ordinary trees that grow straight up in favorable conditions, these trees grow stronger by adapting to harsh winds, heavy snows, and severe storms. Their twisted trunks and gnarled branches make them virtually unbreakable. They don't just survive adversity, they're transformed by it. This is the essence of battle testing your mindset. I learned this principle while working with fighter pilots in their combat simulation training. They deliberately create scenarios more challenging than anything they might face in real combat. Why? Because they discovered something profound. Your performance under pressure will never exceed your level of preparation. Let me share a remarkable transformation I witnessed. A business leader was consistently crumbling under high-stakes presentations. Instead of avoiding pressure, we created what I call pressure labs, controlled environments where we could systematically increase the stakes. until pressure became a performance enhancer rather than a performance killer. Here's how battle testing works. First, understand that pressure is not your enemy, it's your amplifier. Under pressure, you don't become something different. You become more of what you've trained to be. If you've trained for excellence, pressure will amplify your excellence. If you've trained with mediocrity, pressure will amplify your mediocrity. Second, implement what I call progressive overload for the mind. Just as athletes systematically increase the weights they lift, you must systematically increase the pressure you can handle. Start with challenges that stretch you but don't break you. Then gradually increase the intensity, the stakes, the complexity. The third element is what I call strategic failure training. Most people try to avoid failure at all costs. Champions deliberately create safe environments where they can fail, learn, and strengthen their resilience. Think about how a vaccine works. Controlled exposure to a weakened virus builds immunity to the real thing. I worked with an Olympic diver who was struggling with a particular high-difficulty dive. Instead of avoiding the fear, we created what I call fear inoculation sessions. We systematically exposed him to increasingly challenging situations until fear became a familiar companion rather than a paralyzing force. Here's the powerful truth. Your mindset isn't battle-tested until it's been battle-tested. You can't think your way to mental toughness. You can't read your way to resilience. You must systematically expose yourself to challenges that forge these qualities. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate pressure, fear, or challenges. The goal is to transform your relationship with them. Just like that Yakusugi cedar, you want to reach a point where adversity doesn't break you. It strengthens you. Are you ready for the final piece of this transformation? Because in our closing section, we'll explore how to integrate everything we've learned into a daily practice that turns these principles into your new normal. Your mindset, like a sword, is only as strong as the fire it's been through. Are you ready to step into the forge? Let me share one final story that captures the essence of what we've explored today. In ancient Japanese sword making, there's a fascinating process called folding the steel. The master swordsmith takes the metal and folds it over and over again, sometimes up to 33,000 times. Each fold removes impurities and strengthens the blade. The steel doesn't just change its shape, it transforms its very nature. Your mindset works the same way. Each challenge you face, each pressure you endure, each obstacle you overcome, these aren't just experiences you go through. They're foldings of your mental steel, transforming you into something stronger, sharper, more resilient. Today you've learned the science behind championship thinking. You've understood how to install the operating system of excellence. You've discovered how to forge mental strength through strategic pressure. But knowledge without action is like a sword that never leaves its sheath, full of potential but without impact. The question facing you now isn't about capability, it's about choice. Will you remain like an unfolded blade, full of potential but never transformed? Or will you step into the forge of systematic challenge, allowing yourself to be shaped into something extraordinary? Remember, champions aren't born in comfort. They're forged in the fire of chosen challenges, hammered on the anvil of deliberate pressure, and tempered in the waters of persistent practice. Your championship mindset is waiting to be forged. The fire is lit. The tools are before you. The only question remaining is, will you step into the forge?